Deevo Tindall is a Chief Experience Officer and leading expert in marketing and branding. In this episode of The Communicative Leader, Deevo helps us think through how to best position ourselves as thought leaders in our respective industries. Hello and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million-Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Deevo, thank you so much for joining us on The Communicative Leader. I'm really excited to learn from you. Before we really dive into our conversation, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
A little bit about myself. How far back do I get to go?
Oh, your choice.
I'll just give you the high level version. Well, I run a couple of businesses in Charlotte, North Carolina. They're called the Fusion Brands. One of them is a photography studio that's been around since 2006. And then in the last 2 years, I launched a new division called Fusion Creative. So the long and short of that is we are a branding and marketing agency, and we help small businesses and entrepreneurs help share their message with the larger audience using social media, digital marketing, all the different tools. But more importantly, creating content that tells a story and then using that content to amplify to a very specific type of audience so that they're very well equipped to speak their language and what they're really good at to the right type of audience. And so we teach CEOs how to do that properly.
Yeah, music to my ears. As a communication scholar, I love this. If you take a step back, we think about audience, we think about content, we're more likely to have successful results.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. The business was born from that very gap. I was finding out that a lot of small business owners, specifically small business CEOs and entrepreneurs, didn't really know what to do once they had good content created. It just sort of sat on a digital drive and collected digital dust. And so we set out to kind of fill that gap.
Yeah, really cool. So, we know that you are a branding expert, and today I'd like to think about kind of that intersection of leadership and personal branding. So, to that end, how important is a personal brand for leaders?
Well, I don't think a lot of people think about personal brands, so we should probably define what that looks like. But for me, personal branding, it's a quintessential game changer, really, to be truthful with it. It's sort of the alchemy of transforming from just another industry player to somebody who has a gold standard of things that are about them. It gives people an outlet to express themselves outside of just their business. So, for example, you run a podcast, you have a successful business, but maybe there's other things and other avenues that you want to connect with the larger audience or a very more specific audience. Maybe you want to start doing keynotes, maybe you want to write a book, maybe you want to show up on podcasts like I do. And so people only know you as the CEO of this company, or they only know you as the host of this podcast, or they only know you in the capacity that which you primarily serve, right? And so developing a personal brand takes that to a whole different level and gives you the opportunity to expose yourself to a larger audience so that you can further amplify whatever it is that you're trying to sell, teach, educate, inspire, etc. And so if you're able to develop that personal brand very strategically and cogently, then you can use those side by side with not only your business, but connecting to a much larger audience, different type of person that you had ever connected with before on a personal level, but also on a large group level.
Yeah, and I love it was so succinct from an industry player to the gold standard.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful way to illustrate that.
Well, yeah, everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, so the whole. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
You're good.
The whole key around that whole personal branding space is that there's thousands of podcasters just like you and I, right? There's thousands of CEOs who do operate in the same industry. There are all kinds of people doing the same thing, and we're all competing for the same set of eyeballs. So anything that we can do as leaders to transform what we stand for, what we believe in, our value proposition, and then really use that to share that message on a more personal level with the larger audience enables us to not only continue doing what we're doing and from our business side of view, but then again, expansion to a whole different market we hadn't even considered before potentially.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, what is some impact that you've seen this kind of personal branding or amplifying this message have on someone's success?
Well, for example, I'll just use me as an example. I show up on
Mm-hmm.
about 60 to 100 podcasts a
Mm-hmm.
year. And it's not a week doesn't go by that some podcast was heard by some person who then reaches out to me because they want
Mm-hmm.
more information, or they want to do business with me, or they want to connect with me, or they
Mm-hmm.
want to be on my podcast. And for me, personal branding is really um, the cornerstone of that is not selling per se. It's not so much that you're
Mm-hmm.
selling yourself to a different audience. That's the outcome. But it's really more about setting up an advantage for you so that you can connect with the larger audience and build a brand, not just around your business, but around some of the other things that you might not be able to do in your business, like
Mm-hmm.
keynotes, write books, show up on
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, etc. And just offer a different side of yourself that you hadn't considered before. But
Mm-hmm.
really, the bottom line of it is just being able to connect with a much larger audience. I can't tell you
Mm-hmm.
how beneficial it's been for me. I've booked keynotes from it. I've booked
Mm-hmm.
podcast guests from it. I've booked businesses from it. I got a call this morning from somebody who reached out to me on LinkedIn. She
Mm-hmm.
heard me on a podcast like a month ago, and she found out that I'm running this 30-day course challenge for entrepreneurs. And she's like, I've got 10 people who want to sign up for this. So it's just,
Yeah.
I can't speak volumes enough
Mm-hmm.
about being able to kind of use yourself as the icon to build something bigger
Mm-hmm.
than you've already done.
Yeah, right. Because we're dynamic. It's not static. It's not just a logo. It's not just a slogan. And I
Yeah.
love that you hit in, or you said it's not necessarily selling. So I think some people at first blush are like, "Ooh, I don't know that I could do that with myself." But it's connection. It's getting your name and those services out there.
Yeah, and you do that every day if you
Mm-hmm.
stop and think about it. Like you're
Yeah.
literally doing it every
Yeah.
day. And one thing that I teach a lot of my clients is that you're basically networking and connecting 24/7, from sitting at your kid's basketball game to grabbing coffee
Yep.
in line to at the grocery store. Like you're literally always
Yeah.
connecting. So why not have some purpose behind that
Mm-hmm.
and some impetus behind that so that you can actually connect
Mm-hmm.
on a professional level and share whatever it is that you're trying to share with the world. I mean, there's something you do really well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can we get that message out there to a larger audience? And don't be afraid to do it. Like this is what we're here for. We're here to make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. So, with that in mind, what are some key steps or strategies that a leader could take to create this strong and authentic personal brand?
I think first and foremost, being very, very clear on why and how and what it is that you're doing, then you want to show up for. So, if you're showing up on podcasts like me, have a very clear value proposition on what it is that you bring to the table. So, if you want to write a book, be very clear on what the value is that you want and the lesson that you want to impart in the people reading your book. So, you hear this all the time. It sounds cliche. There's thousands of books being written on it now. But if you can understand your purpose and your North Star around what your personal brand looks like, then you're going to be better equipped to share that message with the audience that you're specifically targeting to reach in the first place. And so one of the things that we do is it's sort of like a personal brand audit, if you will. It's a brand
Mm-hmm.
discovery, and really kind of deep dive and get under the covers and figure out, who are you, man? What do you do? What do you do really
Yeah.
well? What's your value? Why would I give you my money to
Mm-hmm.
exchange this resource exchange for your information? How is it going to make my life different, better, more enhanced, etc.? And so if you can figure all those things out on what your message looks like, then you're going to be more equipped to better sell that, better deliver that message to the audience you're trying to deliver to.
Yeah, and I think too, when you're talking about that, I think we spend so much time externally focused. We research the new car. We even figure out what grocery store am I going to bring my money to, but we don't turn that internally as often as we should. And so
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, considering what those values are that we hold, and then how it is we do things slightly different than
Yeah,
others.
absolutely. Have you ever done anything like that yourself?
I
Gone through a
do.
personal self-discovery?
Here and there, not in the deepest dive that I should. I actually, as part of my day job, I teach PR and writing and research. So I've done some of it there. I've done some of it with working with this podcast, but not as fully as I should.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Gary, many, many years ago, when I left the corporate
Mhm.
world, I was just sort of sitting down with people trying to figure out, what it is I wanted to do when I grew
Mhm.
up.
Yeah.
And he said something to me. This was like 20 years ago, and he said something to me that it has resonated with me. We are unable to read our label when we get stuck inside of our own jar. And so it's interesting, it's why people have therapists. It's why people have coaches. It's why people seek outside counsel, because we're not really able to sort of understand who we are because we've lived with ourselves the entire time. And most people don't take the time to sort of step back and be introspective about who I am, what's my value, what do I do, why am I here, like what is it I'm here to deliver. And we get sort of stuck in this treadmill of just like perpetually doing the same thing without ever really understanding our clear impact. So these personal audits, these personal discoveries are an opportunity for you to be introspective and self-awareness on what your value is to the universe, and then find a way to propagate that and then share it.
Yeah. And what a gift for self, right?
Oh my God,
To really hone in on that.
That's a brilliant point. Brilliant point. Yeah, you're right. We don't gift ourselves very often. We sort of have this idea that we're, and it's great. We're here to serve, we're here to add value, all these sorts of things. But if we are not a full person, if we're not able to fully develop who we are and understand who we are, we're less equipped to be able to deliver to the people we want to serve in the first place, whether it's a father, as a partner, as a CEO, whatever it is, right?
Yeah. So, Deevo, in your opinion, what are some of the common misconceptions or myths that you've heard about personal branding, or that others should be kind of aware of as they start this personal audit?
I think a lot of people have imposter syndrome around who they are first and foremost. And because of that imposter syndrome, they think that personal branding is only for like these big celebrities or these really high profile public figures, or that social media influencer that I saw that has a million followers and is doing. And the thing is those people were once the person you consider yourself as. And so the difference between they and you is that they had the courage and the moxie to step off that platform and say, I'm going to do this. So they just started by starting. And so the biggest misconception is that it's reserved for people that everyone else but you. And I always sort of say, like, why not you? Like, why not you? What are you good at? Why would someone else, even if it's just one person, not want to be receiving that message? Like, why not you? And then I think another misconception is that a lot of people think they lose hope because they think it is a one-time effort, and they posted that one time on social media, and they went on that one podcast, and it didn't result in anything. Like, well, I was on the podcast. Man, I show up on like 100 podcasts a year, and I'll tell you, like, a few of them really have a ripple effect. Some of them are a waste of time, but let me rephrase that. Some of them might appear as a waste of time, but that's not the case, because you never know who's listening. You never know who's watching. And it's not a set it and forget it task. It's sort of like a consistent, always ongoing job to be able to share why someone else would want to do that resource exchange with you.
Yeah. So in some ways, it kind of sounds like it becomes more of a lifestyle, a professional lifestyle. And I love that you use the word moxie, because one, I don't think we hear that enough, and it is so important. But recognizing, again, we check it off on our list one time, wash our hands of it, and move on.
I mean, it's not dissimilar to anything else in your life. If you think about the things that you're really good at, whether it's a fitness program or a new diet you started, or even the job you're in, like, you didn't just go to work one day and be like, oh, I'm suddenly an expert. There is a lot of subtleties and nuances to promoting yourself, to building this personal brand. And I think a lot of people get stuck on that whole word of promoting myself. It sounds narcissistic and vain and all the, but if you're not going to do it, then someone else is going to do it. So why not you? And it's not a vain context if you don't look at it from a vain context. If you reframe that juxtaposition as saying, I'm really passionate about this particular thing, and I feel like when I've shared this with other people, it's made a difference in their life, whether it's a book, whether it's a story, whether it's poetry, whether it's keynotes. And if you can just reframe that from a standpoint of, I'm here to deliver something to someone else to make their life a little bit easier, better, etc., then it might enable you to sort of get rid of that vanity metric that you're sort of measuring yourself by.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. That is a hurdle to get over. And maybe sometimes we have to keep running that race and jumping those hurdles. But if we're committed to this and we're doing it, how do you recommend, leveraging social media, if we're thinking Instagram, X, TikTok, how do we do that and still maintain our professional image?
Well, first and foremost, it really goes back to that purpose that I was talking about at the outline, and really understanding what's the value that you're going to be bringing to the table, and being very, very, very crystal clear on that brand message. So just like you would do with your business, just like you would do with your company, you have a mission, you have an objective, you have a value, you sort of understand what your brand message looks like. And then from that point on, create a strategy centered around content creation and photos, videos, and social media or paid advertising, all the different tools. I mean, there's a bevy of tools at our disposal right now. And you just have to pick. I wouldn't say you have to play in all of them. I would say start small, pick maybe one social media channel that you really feel comfortable with and that you think your audience might be hanging out on. And then put together a content strategy. Within that content strategy, have a diverse set of content ideas, whether it's videos, whether it's photography, whether it's just inspirational quotes, things that you feel you can best show up in. And then plan that in advance. Don't try to shoot from the hip every morning. And then one of the things that I suggest to everybody is you can batch create most of that content. If you just devote a few hours every week or every other week, whatever your efficiencies are, and you batch create this content, which is tied directly to the strategy that you already developed in advance, you'll find that you can sort of use this content on demand as opposed to like thinking, what am I going to post today? I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. And so if you're very strategic about it, just like you would be with your business, then you can also, you can attack your own personal brand from that same perspective.
Yeah. And I love those, obviously your expertise, that batch creating where on the offset, like people might say, there's no way my schedule doesn't permit for this. I can't accommodate it. If we want to do it, we can, right? We're just figuring out how do we block that time.
Well, for that hour and a half that you're going to watch Netflix later tonight, or for that 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes that you're going to sit in your bed in the morning scrolling through your Instagram, reprioritize that and set aside some time. Like I filmed 10 videos this morning between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. And now I have those videos filmed and ready to go. I'm going to put them into my content calendar. I'm going to distribute them on different channels. But I've already had it done. Now I have 10 pieces of content that I can cut up. I can evergreen it. And that's another thing. A lot of people think that just because you film something on one particular day, that it has to be used that day. And it doesn't. You can create content around the sort of the idea of documenting stuff and then use it in a future state or reuse it in a future state or repurpose it for a future state. It doesn't have to be that one-to-one. I post it, so now I have to share it. Like build a library of content. Just build it. Keep building it. Keep building it.
Yeah. And like you said, you had this all done before 9 a.m. where most people are just showing up to log onto their computers, right?
Yeah. Well, I have the benefit of working from home a lot of times, so I'm able to afford myself that luxury, if you will. But again, I refuse to hear from people who say that they don't have time for it. And because then when I sit down and break down their calendar with them and I take a look at, if you were to spend, here's a great exercise for anybody that's doubting me. Take a notebook today, start first thing tomorrow morning. And I want you to literally document your entire day. And I want you to take a look at literally at the end of the day, had lunch from 11:26 to 12:45. I was on my Instagram from 12:45, et cetera, right? And then at the end of the day, if you look at those notes and you can honestly tell me that you couldn't find 30 minutes or an hour somewhere in that gap of wasted time, then okay, cool. But I would bet that 99% of the people, once they journal themselves for the day, would be able to see gaps where they could reprioritize, reorganize their day, put their phone away, not be scrolling through it, and get this done something for themselves.
Yep. Bingo. I do this exercise with my students a lot, and it's just thinking about how a lot of times we've never learned time management and what a powerful tool it can be.
Absolutely.
So thinking then, digital media, I'm thinking about our leaders out there who are trying to stand out, like you said, move from just an industry player to gold standard. What are some of the best practices for them on LinkedIn?
I think for me, that's a great question because I'm toiling with LinkedIn right now. And one of the strategies that I have found, first and foremost, it has to be consistent. And secondly, there has to be some sort of a value add. You can't just show up and talk about your promotion or everything. For me, I like to shake things up. And I don't want to just post the same stuff because everyone's posting the exact same thing. So, and it's not shake things up so that you look like this rogue rebel. I'm not saying that, but like, if you are speaking about, let's say you're a business coach, because I work with a lot of business coaches, and you're training other people and entrepreneurs, CEOs, et cetera, think about some of the things that you tell them that you might sort of have a little bit of a tendency to not share in public. How can you reframe that information and put that out there? Again, the idea is to be able to add value, respect the rules, but do not be afraid to bend the rules. Be a leader who speaks not just to inform people, but really challenges and stimulates sort of this new way of thinking. I think because you're in this position with access to 8.5 billion people, like truly, you have the opportunity to use this as not just an echo chamber, but to really introduce some of the fresh perspectives that you have in your mind, or these ideas that you have. And don't just come at it from a standpoint of like, oh, I'm just here to disrupt, but lead with the blend of wisdom and some daring. And it's sort of like where tradition meets innovation, if you will. Like, how can you find that small little break in, and without being too audacious, but at the same time being a little bit bold and calculated in how you address stuff? And be curious. Take a look at what other people are doing, and then say, okay, I see 9 out of the 10 people that I've just followed basically said the same thing. What is it that I'm really good at and passionate about that I can share that might add some value to them? And don't just deliver it in the same way. And don't be afraid to use different methodologies to deliver your message. It's like, don't always just post text. Maybe get on a video. Maybe do a LinkedIn Live. Maybe post a recorded video. I'm not saying you have to dance. You're never going to see me dance, but be original, man. Everyone else is already taken. Like, you're the only one left, so be you.
Yeah, that is really, really helpful. And I love that idea of respecting rules, but not being afraid to bend them. And you just said it so beautifully, that intersection of tradition and innovation, because we don't want to alienate those who are more traditional and have taken that path and lean into that. But we also don't want to get stuck there either.
Yeah, I can give you a perfect example of this, because people are like, "Oh, that's easy," and I mean, sorry, that's really difficult, and it's easy for you. You do it all the time. But I was once you. I had to start somewhere once before as well. And so, today's post on LinkedIn that I recorded is going to be centered around. It's a video. I just literally put my phone on my tripod, and I just recorded a quick video. And one of the things it came from a conversation I was having last week with my workout buddy. We go to the gym every morning at 5 o'clock, and we were sort of sitting there. He's like, Deevo, I can never get you to answer your phone. And I was like, dude, how many times do I have to tell you, just text me first and I'll call you back? My phone is never turned on. I will not answer the phone. Answering the phone is a death trap for distraction. There are only 3 people who have access to my phone: my 2 kids and my wife. And they can call me anytime they want. They can get me on anytime they want. That you can set up your phone for some emergency contacts to get through. But anything else, forget about it. I'm never going to answer the phone. And the phone doesn't even ring. And it's because in my business, I own 2 businesses. I've got a bunch of other stuff going on. My phone would literally ring me all day long. And so my post today is like, okay, some of you are going to probably call me crazy for saying this, but turn your goddamn phone off, because your phone, my phone is turned off all day long. I will not touch my phone during business hours, because I don't want to get stuck in the Instagram or the LinkedIn trap. I don't want to be answering the phone. And then here's another sidebar that he brought up that wasn't even my point. He's like, it's a really good point, because especially if you're taking work calls all the time, maybe there's things that you're not necessarily prepared to answer right then and there. So if they can leave you a message, it gives you an opportunity to sort of prepare for that call, kind of understand how you can best show up. Maybe there's some answers you need to research, yada, yada, yada. So for me, again, that's sort of like a bit of an outlier perspective. Never answer your phone, especially if I'm in a service-based industry. So like, that's a pretty big move for me to say. But dude, I have 25 ways to get back to you. I can text you. I can call you back if I must. I can DM you. Like, there's a billion other ways that we can connect. I'm just never going to answer the phone, because that's a death trap for me.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's a perfect way to, like you said, acknowledge tradition, push boundaries a bit, but too, as you and your friend point out, the immediacy of it. So it's taking your time. And then many of us aren't at our best when it's prompted out of the blue in an area where our mind isn't currently working. So we're not giving our best self. So I love that idea of being able to take that few minutes, even if you call right back, to look into what the question is, have that solid response that you feel good about.
Yeah, and I even have a voice message set up that says, hey, I'm not answering phones right now. but if this is urgent, send me a text message and I'll get right back to you.
Yep.
And what that does is it empowers the other person to say, you're not a dick. I'm not just ignoring your phone call,
Yep.
but you can certainly drop me a text message and we can have that exchange in a matter of seconds. And if it requires a phone call, I'll make the point to call you back. But the thing of it is like, if I'm in the middle of a podcast right now with you and I'm over here seeing my phone, I'm ringing and I'm answering, I'm like, okay, what happens is you get distracted from all the things that you're focusing on. And then you get off going down rabbit holes of all these other things. And it's like, shit, man, I got to get back to the task. And I forgot what I was doing. So for me, it's all about like staying in my lane, working on the things that I'm doing, get those done, move on to the next task. And that just gets in the way. And so I created this whole social media video around it because for me, that's a little bit edgy. I have a different perspective on it, but people are going to see that. I'm like, hey, I hate that idea, or I really love that idea. So the whole idea is to sort of like offer this information that people that make them think, that make them ask, that make them question themselves. So you don't want to just create boring content. You want to put stuff out there that starts conversations, right?
Yeah, exactly. Awesome example. And my next question, actually, we could continue with this because now I'm thinking, what are those expectations for engaging with followers or reacting to comments? So you might have some people, like you said, being like, this would never work for me, or I love this, great idea. How do you coach people on finding that balance there?
So the question is, how do I coach people in finding the balance and how to respond to their comments? Is that really?
Yeah. How much do we engage? How much do we react?
Man, if you're not a celebrity, you should be responding to every single comment you get, especially early in the game. Now, as your profile grows and you become really famous and popular, which all the power to you, then you have you sort of have an excuse to not respond to a million people that might be responding. But there's a venture to guess that about 95% of us aren't those people, and that we have small onesie twosie engagements. And if you don't have the time to send back a quick message to 10 people, then you should probably not be on social media, because the whole point of being on social media is, big idea here, be social, right? Engage in a conversation. Like if I saw you in your office, man, and I walked up to you and was like, hey, Penny, how's it going? Are you just going to turn around and walk? Or, hey, Penny, I love how you dressed today. And I loved you at that keynote yesterday when you were talking in front of it. It was like brilliant. Are you just going to turn around and walk away? No, you're going to engage me in a conversation. So if people are taking the time to engage with you, you sure as hell better take the time to engage back. And if you don't want to engage for any other reason, the algorithm will reward you. So if you're going to play on this paradigm, if you're going to play in this sandbox, you might as well try to use some of the rules to your advantage. So you should be responding to everybody. And you should also be proactive about how you engage. And this is where I falter. But going out and engaging with people proactively, not from a selfish perspective, but like, hey, follow me, check out. Like, don't go on there and be like, hey, you should come check out my class. Literally take the time to check. Hey, I saw your post yesterday on being leadership in a corporate space, and I thought what you said was absolutely genius, but I had a question about it. Could you answer? Like, have a real freaking conversation with people, and you'll see what happens. Because once you're engaging with them and you're talking with them, other people see that and they feel like, hey, I want to join in this conversation. And then before you know it, you start having these multiple conversations and the compound effect kicks in. And before you know it, you got people like all over coming in to check out this conversation. So man, you should always be engaging. Always.
Yeah. And I love that comparison to, you're right. If this was someone walking by my office, I would not turn my back, not really shut the door. And that's a good thing to remember is they're there. Maybe not in
social
the way we used
media
to see them,
is social media is designed to be social. That's the whole point of it. You have an audience all over the world that is waiting to hear some amazing intellectual thought seed that you could potentially share with them. Freaking share it with them. Get out there and do it. Start right now. Just start doing it. You have nothing else to lose. And that's the other thing that's crazy to me. You asked that question earlier. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose?
Exactly.
Really, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
You have everything to gain, but you literally have nothing to lose. So go out there. Go be.
That is a perfect segue to my next question. So I'm wondering, not necessarily about losing, but are there potential risks or pitfalls for people who are, dive into these digital platforms to promote their ideas and successes? Is there anything?
Yeah, I mean, there is always risks with everything. I think you just
Mm-hmm.
have to mitigate those risks and just
Mm-hmm.
understand why you're showing up. I have a really interesting story to share. I'm in the middle of
Mm-hmm.
hiring a social media manager right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sharing the story last week at a keynote I was doing, and people thought I was crazy. And I was like, no, I'll show you if you
Mm-hmm.
really want to see. So I'm hiring this
Mm-hmm.
social media manager, and she fits all the boxes, like
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, right? And so I get her in an interview, and we're having this conversation, and we're going back and forth. And I was like, this woman is a rock star. Like, what am I missing here?
Yeah.
So anyway, she shares her social media channels with me so I can sort of see what she's doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, like censorship tag needs to be put up right now.
Yeah.
So like the risks are,
Yeah.
if you're showing up as a
Yeah.
social media manager for other
Mm-hmm.
people that you're going to be offering your
Yep.
services to,
Yeah.
you sure as hell better have your ducks lined up on your
Mm-hmm.
own. And you probably should not be putting that information out there if you don't want people to see it. Because if I'm going to ask you, for example, Lee, you hire me to do your social media, you're most likely going to connect with this woman, and then you're most likely going to ask to follow her, and you're most likely going to go check her out, and then you're going to be like, dude, who's managing
Yeah.
my social media? So yeah, the
Yeah.
risks are like, it's a double-edged sword. Like, play your cards right,
Yep.
understand why you're here, add value, and just remember,
Mm-hmm.
every single piece of content you put out there can be seen by every single person on the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're saying things that you don't want to say, or that you said in anger, or you said in a passionate moment of throes of something, it's
Yeah.
out there. Like, you can't reverse it. You
Yeah.
might be able to delete it, but I mean, how many times do we see politicians getting in trouble for some
Yeah.
nonsense, or
Yep.
celebrities getting in trouble for some tweet they put out? So just, like everything else, kind of police yourself, understand your value, understand your thought seed, and go out there and remember that everything you put out there will be seen by somebody, and it's
Mm-hmm.
inescapable. So just understand that space and just operate with sort of like a pragmatic enthusiasm, if you will. Like,
Yeah.
bridle yourself here and there.
Yes. Yeah. It's like I always tell students, if this can go on Tinder, it's not going on these other
That's
forums,
right.
right? Like,
Absolutely.
here's our litmus test.
Yeah. Save your OnlyFans content for OnlyFans, okay,
Yes.
girlfriend?
Exactly. Yeah.
We appreciate you, but we don't need to be seeing that.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't need that in my LinkedIn profile.
Right. So, Deevo, I have two final questions for you. So, on the Communicative Leader, we leave listeners, it's pragmatic leadership or communication tips, advice, challenges. So, first one, what recommendations do you have for our titled leaders out there?
So, in terms of just in general, or
Whatever you want. We can do it with personal branding, or if you have other things with all of the folks you're working with that you think other titled leaders need to hear.
I think, there's not a lot of original content left in the world, and a lot of the things that I'm saying have been recycled by people for hundreds of years. So I think the idea is it's in your delivery. So how maybe can you redefine what you want to share, so that how you share it with people is more memorable, is more unique. And again, I'm not the only person in the world that does podcasts. I'm not the only person who does branding. I'm not the only person who takes photography. But just like every photo, there's a different way to paint this picture. There's a different way, and you and I may have the same subject matter, and we're challenged to create the same photo, right? But you're going to go take it from a unique perspective, and I'm going to take it from a unique perspective. I'm going to use light here, etc. So how can you do the same thing with everything else you deliver? How can you find a unique disposition so that you can redefine what it is you want to deliver, so that you don't look like everyone else? And probably, I guess for me, how can you continually add value? It's really important that you're adding value and not just showing up as a win horn, and being able to communicate your value with some clarity and maybe a little hint of audacity from time to time. Like, curiosity, critical thinking, and courage are sort of like the big three for me. Curiosity, critical thinking, and courage. Like, how can you be curious to learn perpetually so that you can grow and continually add to your tool belt? And how can you critically think so that you don't sound like everyone else? So you've taken the time to sort of absorb the knowledge, reframe it, rework it, understand its impact. And then how can you have the courage to share that with people so that they also can get value? And then the final piece for me, and this is really what I say to everybody, show up to serve first. Really, that sounds cliche, and I'm not being good Samaritan here. You will never see me sell anywhere on social media. Most people know I'm selling. Like, I'm selling a service. Like, you already know when you come to my page, this is what I do, this is why I do it, this is how I'm going to do it. And if you like what I'm saying, there's going to be a conversation and opportunity to sell. But don't do it all the time. Like add some value to people. Don't be afraid to give things and serve people. And it's crazy when you reframe that and take that position of things, other people can see that and smell that and sense that, and they're going to be more inclined to engage with you instead of putting up their like X mark to get away from you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So helpful and really pragmatic. And I love that because the focus of this podcast is helping people to change their work life now, right?
Mm,
Without years of extra schooling or new technology or purchases. So they're really helpful. In
mm.
this last question, so you usually then ask about employees of all ranks and industries. But that last, you answered that really well. So I'm wondering about our new grads or folks who are switching industries, people who are identifying as a novice. How do you recommend they start to, do they dip a toe into this or do they dive right in? What do you recommend there?
So diving into social media, diving into entrepreneurship, diving into what
I
particular?
would think the personal branding, kind of establishing themselves
Well, there's no
as
reason why
a
you
unique.
can't start now. I think the first
Mhm,
piece is really just getting some clarity, take some time. I had this in my keynote last week. I had a couple of college grads that were still in
mhm,
college that attended this session that was mostly filled with 40 and older
mhm.
professionals, which I was like, and they sat in the very front of the room, and I was like, dudes, let me give you guys high fives right now because this is
Yeah.
like a good move. This is a
Mhm,
moxie move right here.
mhm.
Most people your age are out, drinking and doing
Yep.
something silly, whatever, and you're still
Mhm.
in college and you decided to come to a business professional networking event to hear me
Yep.
keynote. Like that's kind of a big deal. So for me, I think the first thing would be very, very curious about what your value is and
Mhm.
take some time to break that down so that you can develop your personal brand around something, and don't just say, hey, I'm going to develop this personal brand so that I can become famous and make lots of money. That's the output. Remember, that's the output. But the journey is going to require you to have some strategy behind it to get there. And so
Mhm.
before you can step into that journey, you sort of have to have some GPS coordinates. Man, I'm dropping all kinds of
Mhm.
colloquialisms today and
Yeah.
metaphors, but have some coordinates, if you will, like understand where you want to go with this and know this, that end, wherever it is, how audacious it might be, there's a process along the way that's going to require you to be iterative and flexible and
Mhm.
nimble and adaptive and all those things, and consistent, and just consistently
Mhm.
grow into that. So I think the first advice, that was really long-winded, is just sort of like get some clarity around your value and understand how
Mhm.
you want to show up in the world. And then once you've done that, hire a photographer, man. Go spend a day with somebody out
Mhm.
in whatever your landscape is, and spend some time creating some content around yourself. Don't just rely on yourself to take selfies. Like for a few $100s, you can hire a photographer to spend 2 or 3 hours with you to
Mhm.
create some content. Or if you don't want to do that, go invest in a decent microphone and again, and then just
Mhm.
start documenting. I think people get too carried away with creating something as opposed to documenting. Everything should
Mhm.
be documented. If you're going to start using social media to your advantage, you've got to arm it with ammunition, and that
Mhm.
ammunition is in the form of documenting things. So you have a good idea. If you were to open up my phone, like I'll just tell you right now, like there's probably, I'm just going to tell you how many I have that I haven't even done with anything with. I have 80,000 different notes or comments that I've put into my phone about things or ideas or stuff that I want to
Mhm.
follow up on or do. And I organize that based upon social media
Mhm.
posts or business ideas, and just start writing things down and journaling as like
Mhm.
really start building and fleshing this out so that you can start putting something together. It's like building a resume, like you don't just sit down and be like, hey, I did that. Like you take the time to sort of sort and organize all the things you're good at and all the things that you want to step into. So you're building your personal brand is not really dissimilar to that.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And I think so many people don't understand how you go from A to Z and you recognize it is that journey. And when we're documenting along the way, we have some really great content that can help serve others and
Yeah.
recognizing I've been there. Look at these posts a while ago. So
Yeah. I've been there too. I mean,
yeah.
and again, I think the problem with, especially with younger generations, since that's what
Hmm.
you're talking about, or people in
Hmm.
general,
Hmm.
because we live in this age of like instant gratification where we
Yeah.
have everything at our fingertips. We have microwave ovens, we have food
Yeah.
delivered to our doors, we have
Hmm.
anything we possibly want can be delivered within a matter of hours to our front
Yeah.
doorstep. We can basically do, we've never had, I don't know that there's ever been a time in the history of this stage of humanity where we've
Hmm.
had so much potential and opportunities to deliver something to someone else or receive something. And so, but the downside of that is we've sort of got caught up into this sort of concept of like,
Hmm.
I want to be
Yeah.
famous now.
Yes.
I expect to
Yep.
make the money now.
Mhm.
It's like, dude,
Yep.
the world doesn't always operate on instant microwave
Yep.
delivery. There's got to be a process. You got to build, you got to build,
Yes.
you got to build, you got to build. So I got to remind myself that as well on a regular basis.
Mhm.
Trust me, I'm like, it's not. It's me. I suffer from like,
Yep.
wait, I didn't get that contract last week. Shit, like why not? And you start worrying
Yep.
about it. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So I'll stop.
No, that's really, really helpful. Same thing. My dad always said, Leah, they call it work for a reason.
That's
And that's
right.
what I lean into in those days when it feels harder than the other days. Right.
Love
Well,
it.
Deevo, thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise. This has really been a blast. But more importantly, I know it's really going to help listeners.
I appreciate the time. Thank you for having me on as a guest. I really loved it.
All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on the Communicative Leader.